The arrest
Rachel
happened so
Whitecrow, stop
fast
right there.
that the woman didn't have time to put
Are you
down her
Rachel
coffee.
Whitecrow?
Yes, what's this about?
One
We have
moment,
information you're harboring
Rachel
illegal aliens. We
Whitecrow
need you
was
to come with
walking
us.
across
I'm
the
the tribal
parking lot of the
prosecutor. I work right
Tohono
there. I have
O'odham
court in
Nation
10 minutes.
Judicial
You've made a
Court
mistake.
Ma'am,
building.
we need to verify your identity
Case
and ask you
files
some questions.
under
You
one
can
arm,
cooperate or we can do this the
travel
hard
log
way.
Listen to me carefully.
in the
That's
other
the
hand.
tribal.
The next moment, two icy agents had her against the hood of her own car, coffee spilling across the pavement, files scattering in the desert wind. She kept saying the same thing over and over. I'm the tribal prosecutor. This is the courthouse. You're on tribal land. They didn't care. What Agent Marcus Riley and Agent Jennifer Coe didn't know was that the entire arrest was being watched. Not just by the security cameras mounted on the Judicial building. Not just by the 3 tribal police officers who'd been inside having coffee. But by a federal observer from the Bureau of Indian Affairs who happened to be there for a completely unrelated meeting and had his phone out, recording everything. From the moment the agent's vehicle crossed onto tribal property without authorization. The video went viral within hours. But the legal earthquake it triggered would take 18 months to reach its conclusion. When it did, a federal jury would award Rachel Whitecrow $1.8 million and send a message that would echo through every ICE field office in the country. Tribal jurisdiction isn't a suggestion. It's law. And if you ignore it, you pay. Before we go further, if you believe federal agents should face consequences when they violate tribal sovereignty, hit subscribe. These stories matter. Your attention makes accountability possible. Rachel Whitecrow was 41 years old, a graduate of Arizona State University's law school, and had served as a prosecutor for the Tohono O'odham Nation for 9 years. She handled everything from domestic violence cases to wildlife violations to land use disputes. She lived in a small house on the reservation with her teenage son and her mother. She drove a tan Honda Civic. She'd never been in trouble with any law enforcement agency. Ever. That Wednesday morning in October felt routine. Rachel had 2 hearings scheduled, both minor cases. She'd stopped at her office to grab files, then walked across the parking lot to the courthouse at exactly 9:18 a.m. The judicial complex sits in Sells, Arizona, the capital of the Tohono O'odham Nation, about 60 miles southwest of Tucson. The buildings are modern, low-slung desert architecture with signs clearly marking them as tribal government property. Agent Marcus Riley had been with ICE for 11 years. He'd built a reputation for aggressive enforcement and not asking too many questions. Agent Jennifer Coe was newer, 6 years in, but she'd learned from Riley. They'd received an anonymous tip the day before claiming that someone named Rachel Whitecrow was harboring undocumented immigrants at a residence on the reservation. The tip gave an address. No other details. Riley ran the name through federal databases and got a hit showing a Rachel Whitecrow with a Tohono O'odham address. He didn't verify anything else. Didn't check tribal records. Didn't contact tribal police. Didn't consider that there might be more than one person with that name. He just assumed he had the right person and drove onto the reservation to arrest her. What Riley and Coe failed to understand or chose to ignore was that the Tohono O'odham Nation has its own government, its own police force, its own courts, and its own legal jurisdiction over its territory. Federal agents can't just show up and start making arrests without coordinating with tribal authorities except in very specific emergency circumstances. The security camera on the courthouse captured their SUV entering the parking lot at 9:16 a.m. Captured Riley and Coe getting out and scanning the area. It captured Rachel walking across the lot, completely unaware. And it captured what happened next with perfect clarity. Riley approached from her left. Coe circled around to cut off any retreat. Rachel saw them at the last second, her instinct telling her something was wrong before her conscious mind caught up. She stopped walking. "Excuse me, can I help you?" Riley pulled out his badge, flashing it quickly. Are you Rachel Whitecrow?" Rachel's grip tightened on her coffee cup. "Yes. What's this about?" Riley moved closer, invading her space. "We have information you're harboring illegal aliens. We need you to come with us." Rachel's expression shifted from confusion to controlled anger. The camera caught it perfectly. The slight widening of her eyes. The deliberate breath. "Harboring illegal aliens? I'm the tribal prosecutor. I work right there." She gestured toward the courthouse. I have court in 10 minutes. You've made a mistake. Co stepped closer from the right. Ma'am, we need to verify your identity and ask you some questions. You can cooperate or we can do this the hard way. Rachel set her coffee cup on the hood of her car carefully. Listen to me very carefully. I am Rachel Whitecrow. I'm the prosecutor for the Tohono O'odham Nation. This is tribal land. You are standing in the parking lot of our tribal courthouse. Whatever information you have is wrong, and you need to contact tribal police before you do anything else. Riley wasn't interested in listening. Ma'am, turn around and put your hands on the vehicle. We're detaining you for questioning. Rachel didn't move. No, you don't have authority to detain me here. This is sovereign territory. If you have concerns, you coordinate with our tribal police department. They're inside. I can walk you in right now. Riley grabbed her arm. Rachel jerked back reflexively. Don't touch me. You have no jurisdiction here. Co moved in, grabbing Rachel's other arm. The files she'd been carrying fell, papers blowing across the parking lot. Her coffee cup tipped over, brown liquid spreading across the hood of her car. From inside the courthouse, Tribal Police Officer Daniel Gomez had been watching through the window. He saw federal agents putting hands on the tribal prosecutor. He was out the door in seconds, his partner right behind him. Hey! Officer Gomez's voice carried across the parking lot. What's going on here? Riley glanced over but didn't release Rachel's arm. Federal business. Officer Gomez kept walking toward them, his hand near his service weapon out of habit, not aggression. I'm Tohono O'odham Police. This is our prosecutor. You need to let her go and explain what you're doing on tribal land. Riley's response was to force Rachel's arm behind her back. She cried out, not from drama, but from genuine pain. The angle was wrong, the pressure too much. Stop. You're hurting me. The handcuffs came out. Officer Gomez was 10 feet away now, his partner flanking. Officers, you need to step back. This is a federal immigration matter. Officer Gomez's voice went cold. That's our tribal prosecutor. You're on tribal property. You don't have jurisdiction here without coordination. Release her now. The standoff lasted maybe 20 seconds. Riley and Co. with Rachel partially restrained. 2 tribal officers with hands on their weapons. And a federal BIA observer named Thomas Chun standing on the courthouse steps. Phone out, recording everything. Then Riley made his decision. He forced Rachel's other arm behind her back and clicked the handcuffs shut. Rachel Whitecrow, you're being detained under Federal Immigration Authority for questioning regarding harboring illegal aliens. Rachel's voice was steady despite the pain. My name is Rachel Whitecrow. I'm the elected prosecutor for the Tohono O'odham Nation. I'm being illegally detained by ICE agents on tribal land without authorization. The date is Wednesday, October 19th. The time is approximately 9:21 a.m. I am a U.S. citizen. I have committed no crime. Officer Gomez pulled out his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 4. We have a 10 to 10 at the courthouse. Federal agents have detained Prosecutor Whitecrow without authorization. Need supervisor and legal counsel immediately. They put Rachel in the back of their SUV at 9:23 a.m. Officer Gomez stood in front of the vehicle, forcing Riley to drive around him. As the SUV pulled away, Thomas Chun was already uploading his video to a secure server and calling his supervisor at the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The arrest of a tribal prosecutor on tribal land by federal agents acting without coordination was unprecedented, and it had been captured in 4K video with clear audio. Rachel was taken to the ICE field office in Tucson. They brought her into an interrogation room and left her there, still handcuffed, for 40 minutes. When Riley finally came in, he had a folder with him. Inside was the anonymous tip and a printout showing 3 different women named Rachel Whitecrow in Arizona, only one of whom lived on the Tohono O'odham Reservation. Ms. Whitecrow, we have credible information that you've been allowing undocumented immigrants to stay at your residence in exchange for labor. Rachel stared at him. I'm invoking my right to remain silent and my right to an attorney. I will not answer any questions. And when my attorney gets here, you're going to wish you'd listened to me in that parking lot. At 10:47 a.m., the door opened. Not Rachel's attorney. The ICE field office director, a woman named Patricia Vance, followed by 2 FBI agents and a lawyer from the Justice Department's Office of Tribal Justice. Director Vance's face was white. Riley Coe out. Now. Rachel was released at 11:03 a.m., 1 hour and 40 minutes after her arrest. The Tohono O'odham Nation Attorney General was waiting, along with a civil rights attorney from Phoenix named Maria Santos who specialized in tribal sovereignty cases. The tribal chairman had canceled his day and driven from cells to be there personally. When Rachel walked out, still wearing the clothes she'd planned to wear to court, her wrists marked from the handcuffs, she was surrounded by tribal leadership and legal firepower. Santos was already on the phone with the Justice Department Civil Rights Division. The video Thomas Chun had recorded was already being analyzed by federal investigators. And Rachel's case files were still scattered across the courthouse parking lot. A physical reminder of the violation. The Tohono O'odham Nation issued a formal protest within hours. The arrest of a tribal official on tribal land by federal agents acting without coordination or jurisdiction was a direct assault on sovereignty. The tribe banned Riley and Coe from tribal land permanently. ICE placed both agents on administrative leave by end of day. The FBI opened a civil rights investigation by the next morning, and Rachel filed a federal lawsuit 6 weeks later. The complaint was thorough: false arrest, assault, battery, violation of tribal sovereignty, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit named Riley and Coe personally, plus ICE as an agency, and it detailed something disturbing. In the 3 years prior, Riley had conducted 14 immigration enforcement actions on or near the Tohono O'odham Reservation. 13 had targeted Native Americans. 11 had resulted in no charges. The pattern was undeniable. The trial took place in federal court in Phoenix 14 months later. The jury included 1 Tohono O'odham member, 1 from the Gila River Indian community, and 7 non-native jurors ranging from a teacher to an engineer to a retired nurse. They watched the courthouse security footage. They watched Thomas Chen's cell phone video from start to finish. They watched Rachel being handcuffed while saying she was the tribal prosecutor. They watched tribal police being ignored. They heard Rachel's testimony about the pain, the humiliation, the impossibility of doing her job afterward when everyone in her community had watched her be arrested like a criminal. Then came the cross-examination that destroyed Agent Riley's defense. Agent Riley, when you received the anonymous tip about Rachel Whitecrow, what verification did you do? I ran her name in our database and confirmed she lived on the reservation. Did you verify it was the correct Rachel Whitecrow? The prosecutor held up a document. There are 3 women with that exact name in Arizona. 2 live in Phoenix. 1 lives on the Tohono O'odham Reservation and happens to be the tribal prosecutor. Which one did your tip reference? Riley shifted in his seat. The tip didn't specify. So you had an anonymous tip with no specifics, a name match in a database, and you drove onto tribal land to arrest someone without verifying you had the right person? I believed we had sufficient cause. Did you contact Tohono O'odham police before entering tribal land? No. Did you seek authorization from tribal authorities? No. Why not? I didn't believe it was necessary. Federal authority supersedes tribal jurisdiction in immigration cases. The prosecutor paused. Does it, Agent Riley? Actually, federal law requires coordination with tribal authorities except in emergency circumstances. Were you responding to an emergency? No. Was there any immediate threat? No. So you had time to make a phone call to tribal police, but you chose not to? I made a tactical decision based on my experience. Your experience? The prosecutor pulled out another document. In 3 years, you've conducted 14 immigration enforcement actions on or near Tohono O'odham land. 13 targeted Native Americans. 11 resulted in no charges filed. Is that a pattern or incompetence? Riley had no good answer. Coe's testimony was no better. She admitted she'd followed Riley's lead without questioning whether they had jurisdiction. She admitted she'd heard Rachel identify herself as the tribal prosecutor and ignored it. She admitted she'd seen tribal police and continued the arrest anyway. The defense tried to argue qualified immunity, but the prosecution destroyed it. Qualified immunity doesn't protect agents who violate clearly established law. Tribal sovereignty has been established law since 1832. The requirement to coordinate with tribal authorities on tribal land has been federal policy since 1975. These agents didn't make a mistake. They made a choice. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Liable on all counts. The damages phase took 2 more days. Rachel's attorney presented medical records documenting wrist injuries from the handcuffs, psychological evaluations showing anxiety and PTSD, testimony from colleagues about her damaged reputation. Then came the punitive damages argument. This wasn't just about compensating Rachel. It was about deterring future violations of tribal sovereignty. The jury awarded $1.8 million, $300,000 in compensatory damages, $1.5 million in punitive damages. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Rachel sat with her hands folded, her tribal chairman beside her, her son in the row behind. When the judge dismissed the jury, Rachel stood and thanked them individually. The judge, a Clinton appointee named Margaret Foster, added her own statement. The actions of these agents represent a fundamental misunderstanding of tribal sovereignty and federal Indian law. They arrested a tribal official on tribal property during the course of her official duties based on an unverified anonymous tip. The verdict sends a clear message that tribal sovereignty must be respected and that federal agents are not above the law. Riley and Co. appealed. The appeal was denied. Both agents were terminated and barred from federal law enforcement. ICE implemented new protocols requiring advanced coordination with tribal authorities before any enforcement action on tribal land. The Tohono O'odham Nation uses Rachel's case as a training example for new tribal prosecutors. Rachel still serves as tribal prosecutor. She still parks in that same parking lot. And every federal agent in Arizona knows exactly who she is and what happens when you think your badge overrides tribal sovereignty. Years later, when asked if the settlement brought closure, Rachel's answer was measured. The money helps. But closure isn't really possible when you've been handcuffed in front of your community for doing your job. What matters is that those agents can't do this to anyone else. That's not closure. That's accountability. And sometimes accountability is the best justice you can get. The video Thomas Chun recorded is now used in federal law enforcement training on tribal sovereignty. It shows exactly how quickly lawful authority becomes criminal violation when jurisdiction is ignored. 2 agents learned that lesson after destroying their careers. And somewhere on tribal lands across America, prosecutors and council members and everyday tribal citizens saw that verdict and felt something powerful. Proof that sovereignty isn't just words in old treaties. It's enforceable law. Should federal agents who violate tribal sovereignty face automatic criminal prosecution? Drop your answer in the comments. Because what happened to Rachel Whitecrow wasn't about one wrongful arrest. It was about whether the United States government actually means it when it says tribal nations have sovereignty, or whether that promise disappears the moment a federal agent decides it's inconvenient. If you believe tribal sovereignty must be defended and that no badge puts anyone above the law, subscribe and turn notifications on. Tomorrow we're covering another case where documentation and courage exposed federal overreach that everyone thought was untouchable.